Why are we here at this panel and at this convention? Why do we gather every 4 years? Clearly, it's not just to choose new leaders, not just to fire ourselves up for the fights that lie ahead. We come together for a more powerful, more fundamental reason, to reaffirm our values, the values that bind each of us together, values of dignity and respect and of opportunity. Now, our movement is not a monolith. We welcome everyone to the fight. We have Democrats and Republicans. Hell, we even have libertarians and vegetarians. But as a UFCW member, I've got to say the vegetarians aren't very good for our meat cutters. Our values are what brings us together. Our values are the values of justice. Our fight is a fight for justice. And our ranks are strengthened, our movement solidified because of the diversity of opinion, of background, and of life experience represented herein. Looking around this room, we don't just see local leaders and organizers and activists. We see a vivid universal tapestry of America, every thread of which is woven together by our values of commitment to justice. A tapestry bearing those three most hallowed words of American history: e pluribus unum, from many, one. One voice for working families, one union and one unit on the picket line, at the negotiating tables and in capitals across our country. One conscience for our nation, and one force for an American dream where every single person has the opportunity to work a decent job, where they're treated with dignity and respect, where the work we do is valued and recognized by earnings that provide for our families today and opportunities for our children tomorrow. We fight to make the American dream a reality for every person in that country. And when we talk about wages, we also talk about benefits, a pension that people can depend on, health care for our families. We were fighting for health care before there was anybody else in that fight. That's right. We made it possible for the Affordable Care Act to become the law of the land. And I'm proud that I authored the first state law implementing the CARE Act. But it is all for naught if this administration doesn't get off the dime and fix the Taft-Hartley problem plans that are in the Affordable Care Act. We have got to get it fixed. When you look at all these questions, it is fitting that our convention and this panel take place just a handful of days removed from the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. People think of Dr. King and the speech, and that is the memory that people walk away with. But there would have been nobody there to hear the speech if it wasn't for a great labor leader. It was A. Philip Randolph who conceived of the march and nurtured it for 20 years. First in 1941, and ultimately winning landmark protections that year to bar discrimination in federal contracts, but then bringing that march to fruition in 1963. You see, that was a day of justice, a day that the values that we reaffirm today, that we are fighting for every day, are in display to the entire world. A day when 250,000 Americans joined civil rights leaders like Bayard Rustin and clergy leaders like Dr. King and labor leaders like Walter Reuther to make clear that our dream was the American dream and that we wouldn't rest until that dream was fulfilled for all of us. So many members of our movement stood on the National Mall that day, just as so many of us commemorated ourselves over the last few weeks. And that's because we stand and fight for justice wherever justice is wanting. Look at the goals of the march, and you'll see why our movement was there. Civil rights for all, the same rights we're fighting for in every single union contract. Our Secretary-Treasurer talked about equal pay. I'm proud that the first contract I ever saw with an equal pay clause in it was a 1942 retail clerk's contract in the San Francisco Bay Area. But it has to exist for everyone. Protections against workplace discrimination based on animus, whether it was based on race or sexual orientation or gender. Voting rights for all. Union efforts were crucial to passing the Voting Rights Act in the 60s, and we're on the front lines against voter suppression laws in states like North Carolina and Texas. And economic justice for all. The March on Washington called for a minimum wage of $2 an hour, which in today's day would be $14 an hour. Unions fight for a livable wage, not just for our members, but for all working people. Our fight is a fight for justice, one we've been fighting for nearly 2 centuries, and one we will never abandon. We stared down Pinkertons and arrests, prosecutions, Taft-Hartley, Ronald Reagan, and Scott Walker. In all these fights, we were strengthened by our values because we understand that when we win, workers win. I want to be absolutely clear. You need to look no further than this city and this state you're in right now to see how true that is. I'm honored to serve as Speaker of a state legislature whose members share our value. When I first took office, I had to deal with a guy named Arnold Schwarzenegger as my governor. And immediately started negotiating with him during a budget fight in the worst period of the Great Recession. His solution was to propose cuts that would balance the budget on the backs of working families, shredded the safety net, and cost 400,000 teachers, cops, firefighters, nurses, and other public servants their jobs. My colleagues and I made it clear to the governor that we value working families and that we were prepared to stand and fight. We didn't want to take this the way other budget negotiations have gone. And instead, we took a page out of each of our books. We came up with a counter proposal, the California Jobs Budget, a budget that was predicated on protecting jobs for all people in our state. And we stared him down. During the hottest part of the summer, halfway through that fight, one of my colleagues asked me how long we could hold out. And I reminded him of the 2003-2004 grocery strike here in Southern California. I said we were out for 141 days, and I knew we could go that long at least. We stared down the governor, and on the 100th day, the Terminator blinked. In the end, because we came together and we fought, we protected the jobs of 400,000 families right here in our state. We proved to Schwarzenegger that we fight hard in defense of our values. Now, since then, we've elected a new governor, and together we fought hard to make those values a reality. And the reality is this: California is the state where our values become law, and California is a state that's powering the national economic recovery. Now, that's not a coincidence. It's a result of a commitment that I share with our governor and my colleagues, fighting for opportunity for every Californian. In the last year, we've created 1 million new jobs. Our housing market is recovering. Our GDP is growing 1 percentage point faster than the rest of the country. Our revenues are rebounding faster than all but one other state, and our economic recovery is growing at a rate faster than 44 other states. And new workers are joining public sector and private sector unions every single day. We stand and fight for working people of California, and as a result, every single day brings new opportunities for a great swath of middle-class Californians. We fight for them because we recognize that our movement, like our state, is a community where every person, no matter their background or status, should have the opportunity to live their American dream. And we know that the fight isn't easy. The road to justice is long and difficult, but it's a road that each of us are committed to traveling, together with pride and purpose and solidarity. And in doing so, we give life to the profound wisdom of Dr. King when he said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but that it bends towards justice." Brothers and sisters, together we can keep bending that arc.